Cadbury's from Dunedin. We've had they no longer do giant Jaffas. I found out, which is and it's terrible. And I see that RJ's, a local company, has actually picked up the Jaffa franchise, so it's still a New Zealand thing, which is fantastic. But in terms of the chocolate eggs and stuff, if they're going to do that to us, start buying local. I know there's a couple of good chocolatiers in Hawke's Bay, which I'll go for.
There are a couple of good chocolatiers in the Hawke's Bay, aren't there?
Yes. Yeah,
and in Wellington, Victoria, there's the wonderful Wellington Chocolate Company.
Indeed,
I think that's what they're called.
And Shock Chocolates down there as well, and Whittaker's, of course.
Yep. So, in terms of the recipe change, Victoria, I mean, it's quite interesting because this was I'm not a sort of sweet tooth at all, but I did like the marshmallow egg precisely because when you bit into it, you had that hard chocolate bit in the middle. That was what I liked about it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. But having said that, I prefer not to even be talking about Cadbury's Easter eggs. I'm Dunedin born and bred, so I stopped buying Cadbury. Yep, stopped buying Cadbury's once they shut that factory down. And
solidarity, sister.
Absolutely. So who cares if they've hard them? Don't buy their products.
Yeah, but you should be, because at least the new Cadbury half egg was designed in Dunedin. That's what counts, doesn't it?
No, it does not. Actually, I don't. I'm about to do an advertising plug. Here you go. My parents swear by the Warehouse marshmallow eggs, which they think are chewier and more delicious than the Cadbury's ones. And
you're kidding?
No,
are you serious?
I'm serious.
I need support on that. Can anybody text me 2101? Because I don't believe you. Or pop it up on Twitter at the panel RNZ. What are they? The Warehouse marshmallow eggs?
Yeah,
I think it's Waikato chocolate or something along those lines. I know there used to be a company called Van Camp who did the most beautiful big Easter bunnies back in the 80s, which seems to have disappeared. But I think that's been, it might be somewhere in Waikato or in Hamilton, or it could be the Kapiti Coast.
Yeah, look, I don't know. All I know is you buy them at the Warehouse and they're cheap as chips.
All right, there you go. Just on a side note, that was, as Dunedinite, there was always the unstated wisdom that Cadbury's would be there forever in Dunedin. Wasn't that a shock when that closed down?
Well, it was, and part of my childhood is remembering that smell. There was a smell that was emitted from the factory, and it was an amazing smell. And I actually think it's really sad that the plant has shut down, particularly given it was profitable. But also, I can remember doing tours in the days where you could pick chocolates off the assembly line. You could just have a feast. It was, this was pre-health and safety. It was fantastic.
Yeah.
So it's very sad.
Now, just briefly, finishing today, the actress Margot Robbie is getting sick of being asked when she's having babies. Miss Robbie's been doing the media rounds to promote a new film, Mary Queen of Scots. And in an interview with Radio Times was asked what's the most annoying question she's asked. She said, I got married. She said, and the first question in almost every interview is, babies, when are you having one? I just want to sort of quickly your final thoughts on this, Victoria. What's your thoughts on these sort of questions? Because again, Jacinda Ardern was asked, we could go the same types of questions, wasn't she?
Oh, look, it's very frustrating. It's like, George Clooney was a serial bachelor until he married, whereas, other women are unlucky in love. There is still inherent sexism about what females are asked versus guys, but I think it is changing, and I think it'll continue to change.
Do you think it's changing?
Slowly.
Yeah. What about you, Andrew?
I think the acting and stuff she does is her public life, and then there's her private life, and it's called that for a reason.
Right, very good.
Oh,
good. There you go. We did it. An hour and a half later. This is the music. Andrew Frame, here's your
Te whakarongo mai koe ki te reo irirangi o Aotearoa. This is Checkpoint on RNZ National. I'm Lisa Owen. On tonight's program, the life insurance industry gets a serve after a damning report reveals its profits ahead of people, with some customers being charged for expired policies and sold products they can't legally use. The verdict from one industry leader, it's not pretty. New Zealand sizzles again. We'll have the latest, and as temperatures max out, can you rely on Cancer Society sunscreen? That's a heated debate, and why Immigration New Zealand is telling an Auckland restaurateur to sell up and move out despite employing more than 40 people. Don't forget, you can watch us on Facebook and Sky TV Channel 83.
RNZ News at 5 o'clock. Good afternoon. I'm Anna Thomas. The Financial Markets Authority and the Reserve Bank want the government to beef up regulation of the life insurance industry to stop people being ripped off. A joint report by the agencies has not found any widespread misconduct. However, it says the industry has put sales and profits before people, and it hasn't been serious about fixing its mistakes. The Reserve Bank Governor Adrian Orr says no one agency is in charge and there are few enforceable rules, but the industry has been told it has to change.
We may be down the prosecution or the name shame type stuff that makes the exciting headlines, and we will be down the legislative stuff. So it's going to take a significant concerted effort, but we have made it very clear that this is serious and this will be happening.
Adrian Orr says they won't name companies behaving badly until they have specific evidence. The Housing Minister, in response, life insurance companies say they accept the sector has work to do to improve its conduct. The industry body, the Financial Services Council, says members will work towards the June deadline they have been given to come up with a plan of action. The Housing Minister, Phil Twyford, will take a paper to Cabinet outlining what's gone wrong with KiwiBuild and how he plans to fix it. The Prime Minister says they are not building homes as quickly as they would like, with Mr Twyford last week admitting the first target of the year is unlikely to be met. He's previously committed to further targets of building 10,000 homes in 2020-2021 and 12,000 every year after that until 2028. Ms Ardern refused to recommit to any of those until Cabinet has seen Mr Twyford's update, saying what really matters is their 10-year plan.
That's 100,000 homes. And again, as I say, we are only 6 months into that, and we are building and delivering homes. The first families are already in their KiwiBuild homes. It's just not happening at the pace that we would like.
Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern. A Northland landowner could be prosecuted over a fire that has threatened a pine plantation on his land. Fire crews have been sweltering in temperatures in the early 30s today as they fought to contain a fire on a farm west of Whangarei. The region's Deputy Chief Rural Fire Officer, Rory Rennick, says the landowner was burning off a big pile of slash or forestry waste without a permit. And in today's searing heat, the fire escaped.
Had we had a chance to look at it, we would have identified some of the risks and helped the person manage it, and probably suggested that they wait a couple of months until things are getting wetter rather than drier and the risk is easier to manage.
Rory Renwick says the pines are safe for now, but fire crews will have to remain for 2 days to make sure the fire is out, and the landowner may be liable for the costs. Parts of the country have again reached 34 degrees today. By 4 o'clock, Kawerau in the Bay of Plenty was at 34 and Wainuiomata north of Wellington 33.5. Yesterday, parts of the country didn't reach their peak temperature until 6 o'clock. Met Service meteorologist Tui McInnes says the stifling heat will carry on until Friday when a cold front comes in. The United States has ramped up its fight with the Chinese telecommunications company Huawei just days before scheduled trade talks between Washington and Beijing. It's announced more than 20 criminal charges against the company, including bank fraud, obstructing justice and conspiring to steal trade secrets. Huawei's Chief Financial Officer Meng Wanzhou, who's been arrested in Canada, is one of the top executives named. The acting US Attorney General Matthew Whitaker says one charge claims trade secrets were stolen from Huawei's US rival T-Mobile.
In an effort to build their own robot, Huawei's engineers allegedly violated confidentiality and non-disclosure agreements with T-Mobile by secretly taking photos of the robot, measuring it, and even stealing a piece of it.
US Attorney General Matthew Whitaker. Huawei denies any wrongdoing. And China's government says the indictments against Huawei are unfair and immoral. Community organisations have contributed $4.7 million to the Warmer Kiwi Homes program, so some low-income homeowners will be able to insulate their house for free. More than 3,200 homes have already been insulated under the scheme. Here's our political reporter Joe Moyer.
The Energy Minister Megan Woods announced the new funding this afternoon to add to the $142.5 million over 4 years allocated by the government. The $4.7 million in community funding is from district health boards, councils and charitable trusts. It will provide grants for eligible homeowners in places like Northland and South Auckland, those on a low income or in poorer areas, so they can insulate their homes for free. And with the heatwave currently hitting the country, Dr Woods said the benefit of insulation is it also keeps homes cooler in the summer months. From Parliament, Joe Moyer.
A power cut that affected 2,000 homes and businesses in central Auckland is largely fixed. Vector says 15 customers in one street in St Mary's Bay remain without power. It's 5:05. The All Blacks flanker Sam Cane has been named co-captain of the Chiefs Super Rugby side, despite being set to miss more than half the season as he continues to recover from a broken neck. Clay Wilson reports.
Cane broke his neck during the All Blacks' victory over South Africa in Pretoria last October, but despite that has been named in the Chiefs' leadership role alongside All Blacks teammate Brodie Retallick. The Chiefs expect Cane to return to the field at the end of April, but that assessment may be optimistic. The last weekend of April is the 11th week of the 18-week Super Rugby regular season. Cane and the bulk of his All Black teammates rejoined their Super Rugby teams yesterday. The Chiefs kick off their season against the Highlanders in Hamilton on February the 15th. This is Clay Wilson.
The White Ferns have been dismissed for 161, batting first in the second Women's One-Day Cricket International against India in Mount Maunganui. The skipper Amy Satterthwaite top scored with 71 in an otherwise poor batting performance, with the White Ferns dismissed with 5 overs remaining. India lead the 3-match series 1-0. And the All Whites defender Justin Gully is to rejoin the Wellington Phoenix. The 26-year-old played 8 games for the side in the 2015-16 season before transferring to Team Wellington. Gully is in line to make his A-League return this Saturday against competition leader Perth Glory. And that's the news.
The ousted KiwiBuild boss speaks out.
I've been put through an awful 2.5 months by Andrew Chris and his ministry.
Calls to ban honking in the Mount Vic Tunnel.
I've had a few haters on Twitter this morning. One man said my eyes rolled so much that they hurt.
And heads in the sand on climate change.
When we bury our head in the bucket of sand, we can move it further inland so we don't get drowned as the tide comes in.
Keep up with current events. Morning Report with Guy and Espiner and Susie Ferguson, weekdays from 6.
Then on 9 to noon, calls for a gun amnesty as new figures reveal the number of military-style semi-automatic weapons in circulation. And after 10, Christina Rieselman pieces together a climate change jigsaw with sediment extracted from under the seabed. Join me, Catherine Ryan, on 9 to noon after Morning Report on RNZ National.
And now the short forecast from Met Service to midnight. Tomorrow, Northland, Auckland and Coromandel, fine today, cloudy periods tonight and tomorrow with patchy drizzle until tomorrow afternoon. For the remainder of the North Island, mainly fine and hot. However, areas of cloud morning and night and isolated afternoon showers about the central high country. For Nelson, Marlborough and Canterbury, fine and hot with high cloud at times, coastal fog possible tomorrow morning. Buller and Westland, fine and cloudy. For Fiordland, often cloudy, patchy drizzle about the fjords, turning to widespread rain for a time tomorrow morning. Otago and Southland, generally fine and hot with variable high cloud but scattered rain for a time tomorrow morning. And for the Chatham Islands, fine weather. RNZ National, it is coming up to 5:09 and you're with Checkpoint and Lisa Owen.
Thank you. And, well, it's not pretty. That's the verdict from the Financial Services Council on a report into the life insurance industry. The Reserve Bank and Financial Markets Authority review of 16 insurers revealed that some were charging customers for expired policies, selling policies that people couldn't legally use, and also had poor attitudes to fixing complaints and mistakes. Consumer New Zealand says insurers are doing an appalling job of addressing problems in the industry, and the government says it will fast-track changes to protect consumers as a result. The industry body, the Financial Services Council, represents 10 of the insurers that were scrutinised. I asked CEO Richard Clippen if he was embarrassed by the findings.
When you look at the industry, the role of the life insurance sector is to help New Zealanders manage risk in their lives, and that's done through insurance products in a range of different ways. And this sector has been under scrutiny, which we've absolutely welcomed, because ultimately we've got to do better by the consuming public of New Zealand. We play a really important role in their lives, and to the tune of $1.2 billion of claims paid last year, which is significant. There's clearly steps to do, and whether it's the governance piece to improve, whether it's the way we design and create products, through the way we manage our intermediary relationships, there is a lot to consider in this report.
Let's address this head on. Let's go through some of the behaviours outlined in this report. Charging for expired policies, selling policies that could never legally be used by the people who purchased them, double dipping, charging for policies that people had switched or moved, and in one case, targeting vulnerable people, selling them products. I mean, how would you characterise that behaviour?
So, Lisa, like I say, this is not pretty reading in some cases, but I think you kind of, we've got to collectively look at the bigger picture and understand that insurance is important in people's lives, that the sector has evolved.
But that is the bigger picture. That is the bigger picture, Mr. Clippen.
Yeah, and look, the standards that we need to lift to have been clearly articulated by the regulators. And like I say, the industry's got a lot of work to do now to lift our game in the interests of all New Zealanders.
Did you know this stuff was going on?
Look, the Culture and Conduct Report through 2018 has shone a light on the way in which these businesses are run and the products and services that are created. And of course, issues have come to light that need to be fixed. So I think.
Did you know that this kind of activity was going on?
Look, the Financial Services Council represents 10 of the life insurers in the process, and I think what's important is we take the learnings out of this report to better forge an industry that's connected to consumers.
Here's the thing, Mr. Clippen. What is important to people who have bought these policies, what's important to them is whether you knew that this kind of shabby behaviour was going on. Did you know? Yeah.
So, Lisa, I think in the interests of the consumers, there are over 4 million different policies out in the marketplace that reflect over a long period of time. Consumers in New Zealand can and need to be well served by the industry. And the sector, like I say, has got a lot of work to do. Has there been conduct in some players around some products and services? Clearly, the report is telling us yes, and I think we've got to acknowledge that. And
okay, just to be clear, are you saying because of the size of the industry, the problems that have been identified aren't that bad relative to the size of the industry? Is that what you're trying to say?
Not at all. No, not at all. I think what's important for your listeners to understand is that these are large and complex businesses, and there are products and services that have been created over now many years. And of course, life insurance is a very long-term contract, and so there would be clients in New Zealand who would have held policies and bought them in the 70s and the 80s and 90s and so on. And of course, that was a completely different era in terms of how products and services were designed. So, no, we do not resile from the fact that there's a lot of work to do. We're not explaining away the complexity and the size of the sector for poor conduct.
Okay.
The sector has got a lot of work to do.
So, were you ignorant to these issues or willfully blind to them?
Lisa, I think you've got to understand that the sector has been a work in progress. Just last year, there's been a number of merger and acquisitions, and in fact, that's in many ways the story of the sector, where businesses get established, they get bought and sold, and so on. And so, some of the issues that have come to light, may have been in businesses that were purchased now some time ago. So, I don't think it's right to say, we're willfully blind. No, these are large businesses, and the regulators now pointed out work to do. And that's what we're focused on.
So why aren't these businesses getting the basics right, making sure the customer is getting all the information they need, making sure the customer is getting a policy which actually suits them and that they can use at some point? Because some policies were sold to people who could never use them. I mean, how can customers have any confidence in a life insurance policy that they hold today? If they've read this, how can they have any confidence?
Yeah, I think they can have confidence because, like I say, there's 4 million contracts in place, over $2.5 billion of in-force premium in the sector last year in 2017 into 2017, paid out $1.2 billion of claims. The report, the FMA report and the RB report, point to the fact that there's not widespread systemic issues, but they also point to the fact that there's a whole lot of work to be done, and there is some behaviour that totally needs to improve. And like I say, we don't resile from that. We absolutely take it front on. And,
well, Consumer New Zealand describes the way that insurers are doing their jobs in dealing with this as appalling, that you're doing appallingly.
Absolutely not. Whilst I obviously respect Consumer New Zealand, the sector is focused on helping New Zealanders manage and protect their wealth, and that's the task ahead. We've now had a mirror shined onto some of the issues, and whether it's governance and product design and so on, we are a work in progress and we have a lot of work to do.
Who are the insurers who have sold policies and charging for expired policies and not giving their customers their money back? Name some names. Who are responsible?
Yeah, I'm not going to, Lisa, I'm not going to name names.
Why not? If you want to shine a light on it, why not? Why not put it all out there? Be honest.
What I'm here to do is to tell your listeners that the Culture and Conduct Report has been very well received. We are absolutely listening. We know there are things that we need to fix, and the report's only just out. So naming and shaming is not something I'm going to do. What I am going to do is focus on how do we do better as a sector.
So you only want to shine a light on the bits that you want the public to know about. Is that where you're at?
Think that's fair. I don't think that's fair. But like I say, we do acknowledge as a sector that there's work to do, and we absolutely applaud the work of the RB and the FMA in working constructively with the sector, and we're now focused on working constructively to fix a number of these issues.
Do these insurers owe their customers an apology?
I think the members of the FSC absolutely owe their customers what they bought, and to be able to stand behind the risk that they've effectively taken on through their policies. And again, there is a lot of work.
I'm sorry, I'm just a little confused about that. Are the customers owed an apology or not? That was my question.
Yeah. So Lisa, like I say, I think if you tease into the report, issues around frontline staff and claims people are always through the report are very keen to serve their customers. There is no doubt that our members have a lot of work to do to regain the trust and confidence of the New Zealand consuming public, and this is a fairly confronting report. And like I say, it's just landed today, so we're digesting it, and there's plenty of work to be done.
Well, it is about 17 after 5. You're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. Keen to hear what you think of that. What has your experience been with the insurance industry? You can text us on 2101, tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ, or email us checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. Well, temperatures around the country have soared again, with Taumarunui taking out the top spot at 32.3 degrees as a heat wave washes over the country. And the hot weather may be responsible for problems with the trains in Wellington. Services on the Johnsonville and Hutt Valley lines have been suspended due to power outages and a points failure. In Northland, firefighters have been battling scrub fires, while parts of Canterbury have moved to a restricted fire season, meaning permits are required. While DHBs aren't reporting any significant increase in heat-related illnesses, medical experts are still urging people to be careful and take the heat seriously. Emma Hatton reports.
Forecasters predicted the hottest temperatures would hit the central North Island, and by 10 a.m, Kawerau had already reached 29 degrees. But workers braving the heat in Hamilton said they weren't phased.
It's not too bad, actually. Yeah.
It's good. It's nice. I've just come back from holiday in Australia, so it's nice to bring some warm weather back.
Well, I'm from Hawke's Bay, so it's probably not that hot here compared to there. So I don't think it's that hot.
Oh, not too bad. No, not really. Yeah.
Oh, well, we've had a great season up till now, and all of a sudden it's getting hot, and that's how it is.
Further south, the soaring temperatures made for an ideal day at the beach.
About 200 people flocked to Days Bay and Lower Hutt, including Nikki and her son Lucas.
Do you like the beach?
Yeah.
Why?
Because after the beach you can get ice cream.
Over in Petone, the Mackenzie Baths summer pool had a steady stream of customers wanting to cool off. Lifeguard Sean said he was preparing for a busy day.
At the moment this is pretty steady. Like we'd usually be picking up even more than this, but it's still early, so our hot spot's usually early afternoon, like 2 or 3 o'clock.
Yep, so coming up.
Yeah, definitely.
Mother of 2, Rachel, said her children were initially put off by the heat, instead deciding to seek shade inside.
My kids noticed it this morning. They were out on the trampoline and then decided, no mum, it's too hot outside, we need to come in.
Further south, Nelson resident Alan Bate said he was loving the heat at Butcher's Dam, near Alexandra.
Very temperate, lovely. The awning down, a little bit of sun and a bit of breeze, it's fantastic, it really is.
Meanwhile, in Alexandra itself, Cheryl Grubb took her dog out for a swim. She had her own plans on how to keep cool.
I would sit inside and read a book rather than go out and dig the garden. I'd sit inside and read a book rather than do anything, actually.
In Roxburgh, Sally Fineman, who owns Fineman's Whole Foods, saw a roaring trade in ice creams.
I have these amazing ice creams called Dr. Feelgood, and I'm selling a lot. In fact, I just put another order in today for another batch because I knew that I'd need another lot to get me through this heat wave.
While some are coping well with the heat, medical experts are warning people to take it seriously. Alistair Humphrey from Canterbury DHB says people should stay out of the sun when they can and drink plenty of water.
In Europe in 2003, more than 70,000 people died as a consequence of the heat wave they had there. We don't want people dying of heat, so we need to keep an eye on each other and look after ourselves.
The heat is expected to last a few more days, but forecasters say there should be some reprieve on Friday. For Checkpoint, Emma Hatton.
The boss of the Cancer Society says he'll resign if independent tests prove its sunscreens are not up to scratch. The Society and Consumer New Zealand are at loggerheads over conflicting test results on its SPF 50+ Kids Pure. Yet to be published Consumer Commissioned lab tests claim that the sunblock only has a protection factor of 41, not 50 as it's labelled. Cancer Society CEO Mike Kernahan believes the Consumer New Zealand results are flawed because the sunscreen was taken out of its protective container and flown to a lab in Australia to be tested.
Our thinking is that as soon as you decant a product out of a specially designed container, you're automatically compromising potentially the efficacy of that product.
So you're basically saying, sorry to interrupt, but you're basically saying that decanting the sunscreen out of its original container could it have led to the product degrading before it was tested?
That's what we would suggest is most likely to happen, because there can be no other explanation where the product's been tested 3 times, twice by the Cancer Society and once by a consumer, and the test results are 67, 60, and 41. So
and by that you're talking about SPF.
The SPF, yes, the SPF.
Couldn't the explanation be that your tests are flawed and your product isn't as good as the label says it is?
Well, we reject that, A, because it's been tested in 2 different laboratories, and secondly, as I've just explained, it's classed as a medicine. So that's like saying the first tab of Panadol is faulty, but the last one's okay. The fact that a medicine that is a medicine and the very strict manufacturing processes and protocols that are monitored by what's the Therapeutic Goods Association, which is an organisation that runs out of the Ministry of Health in Australia, and they audit regularly all manufacturers of medicines or medicinal products, of which sunscreen is one. So we are really confident that that manufacturing process ensures that each of our products meets the claim on the label.
Right, so we've got a standoff here because each side reckons their test is the best and tells the truth about the product. So the way forward was what? You proposed what?
So what we decided, or what we offered to consumer was, well, let's go together, go to a supermarket or a pharmacy where our sunscreens are sold, and we'll pick any tube of any of our products off the shelf. If you want to do Kids Pure again, let's do that. And we'll send it to any laboratory in the world not either the one that consumer reviews or the one that we've already used, and we'll get a result. And once and for all, we'll know whether or not that product meets the claim on the label, and that's been declined. So
why? What reason did they give you?
They didn't. They didn't. So, and the other thing is that I think they've hijacked the process here too, and I know that sounds a bit controversial and a bit critical, but Consumer New Zealand, when they print the report, what they do, which I think is great, is that they send the copy of what they propose to put in the report to, in this case, us, the Cancer Society, and say, this is what we're going to say in our report. Are there any edits that you would like to make? And they don't always agree, and they don't always take the edits that we suggest. But in this particular case, the deadline is 5 o'clock this afternoon. And we got a phone call at 2 o'clock this afternoon from a media organisation that offered us the opportunity to be a part of a discussion on a scoop tomorrow with Sue Chetman, which immediately suggests that regardless of what we go back with in terms of our editing, they're going to totally ignore.
If you think your product is as good as the label says, how do you explain reports over the summer that some people have been very badly sunburnt while using your product?
Yeah, look, and as we've explained previously, I mean, it's a great question and we take it really seriously. So typically, on average each year, and I'm sure other sunscreen companies are the same, we get about 60 queries. We've had 49 so far this summer, queries from people who've had some sort of experience, typically not a good one, with one of our sunscreens. So we engage with them and we offer them the opportunity to go through a formal process, which to date, 7 people have gone through or are going through the process. 4 have been completed. And in each of those 4 completed formal processes, the sunscreen has been found to meet the claim on the label and that the efficacy of the product has not been compromised. And so there
So to be clear, Mike, do you test the product that the person used?
Yep.
And in all these cases, you've tested the product that the person used?
4.
Yep.
4. So
what does that tell you?
So I don't want to be critical of people, but and one that's not critical.
But you're saying that you're basically implying that they're not using the product correctly. Is that right?
Not necessarily. So just like Panadol, if we go back to Panadol and use sunscreen, some people are allergic to the chemicals in the sunscreen. Like not everyone can take Panadol because they have the wrong reaction to Panadol or any other medicine for that matter. There is always a small percentage of the population that will be allergic to whatever that medicine happens to be, and that will always be the case with sunscreens. Not everyone's the same, not everyone's skin's the same, and everyone has a different reaction or can have a different reaction to any medicine. In this case, we're talking about sunscreen. So that's the first point, and quite often it is an allergic reaction. So when you look at particularly young children, that's why we suggest, so those babies that are under 12 months old, that what you do is you test before you use and you put a little dab on the back of the elbow or the back of the knee the day before you're planning to go somewhere and use a sunscreen and see if there's a reaction.
So none of these complaints have been because of fault with your product?
No, and we have reported that back to each of the complainants.
Before we go, would you stake your job on the sunscreen results that you are saying are right, that this is SPF 50 plus? Would you stake your job on those results that you have?
Well, I have to. I mean, at the end of the day, we manufacture sunscreen for the New Zealand population. We manufacture the sunscreen in Australia because it is classed as a medicine over there.
So if an independent lab were to test this and find that Consumer New Zealand is right and you're wrong, that's it, you're gone, is it?
Well, look, ethically or morally, I think that, like I've talked to you and a lot of other people in the last few days about this, I probably would want to go. because I wouldn't be proud of the fact that I work for an organisation that didn't meet the very high standards that we set.
And that's Mike Kernahan from the Cancer Society. They're staking his job on the veracity of their sunscreens that they do. Well, they do what the label says they do. We asked Consumer New Zealand's Sue Chetwin on the program, but she declined to be interviewed today. We did get a statement from them. And in part, she says the product was tested by an accredited lab and was a 10-person test carried out according to the voluntary Australian and New Zealand sunscreen standard. She said they gave the Cancer Society the opportunity to send their own test results through, and that the Cancer Society provided results for a 3-person test, not a full 10-subject test, which she says they would have expected given the difference that they found in the product's SPF. She says that the Cancer Society's claim that Consumer New Zealand's results are compromised because they decanted the sunscreen into a light-proof container before sending the sample to the lab. She rejects that claim. She says it's common for samples to be sent blind in this way, and that the sunscreen was packed according to the lab's instructions. And she says that the Cancer Society should put its resources into retesting its sunscreen rather than attacking Consumer New Zealand. Coming up on Checkpoint on RNZ National, their turnover was 1.6 million last year and they employ 26 New Zealanders. But Immigration New Zealand says that's not good enough and tells the owners of an Auckland restaurant to prepare to sell up and move back to the Ukraine. A Scottish tourist charged $900 for a 5-minute taxi ride gets his money back, and junior doctors threatening to keep striking throughout February unless hospitals back down in their employment row. We'd love your feedback, especially on the insurance industry and sunscreens. Let us know what you think, what your experiences have been. You can text us on 2101. You can tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ, Facebook us Checkpoint, or email checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. But Anna Thomas is standing by with the headlines now.
Thanks, Lisa. Life insurance companies say they will come up with a plan of action by the June deadline they've been given to improve their conduct. The Reserve Bank and the Financial Markets Authority are calling for stronger regulation of the life insurance industry to stop people being ripped off. In a joint report, the agencies say the industry has to stop putting sales and profits before people. The Reserve Bank Governor Adrian Orr says some companies may be prosecuted, but none will be named without specific evidence. Jacinda Ardern admits the government is not building homes fast enough, but says it's only 6 months into its 10-year plan to build 100,000 homes. The Housing Minister Phil Twyford will explain to Cabinet what has gone wrong with KiwiBuild and his plans to fix it. The Prime Minister says she will not recommit to any of its home building targets until Cabinet has seen Mr Twyford's update. A fire officer in Northland says it will take 2 days to ensure an unpermitted fire on a farm west of Whangarei is out. Rory Renwick says the landowner was burning off a big pile of slash or forestry waste without a permit and may be liable for the costs. The blaze is out now but was threatening a pine plantation on his land. Parts of the North Island have been sweltering in temperatures in the mid-30s today. It's 34 degrees in Kawerau in the Bay of Plenty this afternoon, and just below that in Wainuiomata near Wellington at 4 o'clock. Meteorologist Tui McInnes says the stifling heat will continue until a cooler front on Friday. And the weather may have caused a temporary power cut in central Auckland and affected evening commuters in Wellington. There are no trains between Wellington and Johnsonville or the Hutt Valley this afternoon. The Johnsonville line will be replaced by buses, but people travelling to the Hutt Valley have to find alternative transport. And those are the headlines. I'll be back at 6 with more news and weather.
Thank you. You're listening to Checkpoint with RNZ National. And Nona Peltier joins us in the studio to talk business. So, Sky City, the casino operator, they are expecting to report solid first half earnings, you're telling me, but what's the trick? Even though bottom line is down?
Yeah, that's interesting. So depending on which numbers you look at, it's either up 11% or down 11%. And I'll tell you what the market thought, though. The market thought it was up 11% because the company's share price finished, quite strong today, up at 2.5%. So yes, the market reacted favorably to this guidance update. And what it is basically Sky City's first half net profit was actual profit is likely to be down on last year. But when I talk about normalized profit, which smooths out the win rate of the high rollers business, it's up 11%. So overall, we can expect good things from Sky's first half result. Second half is going to be a bit more challenging because they made quite a good result the year earlier. So we'll find out more about this on February 13th when they report.
So not that far away.
No,
okay, our trade deficit, it's widened to an 11-year high, you say?
Now that's an annual deficit. So yeah, 11-year high due to actually the sharp rise in fuel prices. But when you look at the month, it was a surplus, and that's because fuel prices eased back, and we can expect to see that to continue on through this year. We're expecting that deficit was probably as wide as it gets. 11-year high, it hit $5.9 billion, and that was the highest since October 2007. And that was also because we had a lot of imports, and again, that was the fuel prices flowing through into that. So yeah, interesting year, and of course, we talked about this yesterday with dairy prices. Production values are up, so we would expect the production to increase our overall exports over the coming months.
And what can you tell us about markets? What's been going on today?
Interesting. We were too bad earlier on, but things have changed for sure ever since the U.S. government Justice Department filed formal charges against a Huawei chief financial officer who's been held by Canada for extradition. So yeah, serious business there, and that really put I guess a dark cloud over the talks that are going on between China and the United States over their trade deals. And so the market has really lost a lot of confidence there, and our market fell 1.2% today, a drop of 108 points to 9,006, and the Australian market was also down about 0.5%. Asia overall is looking pretty sad on it, really, so watch this space. And I guess the U.S. dollar, we're going to expect to hear more from the U.S. Federal Reserve this week on interest rates, and that was holding steady at 68.4 US cents, 95.4 Australian, and 52 British pence.
Thanks, Nona. And I'm hearing that Wellington has been a scorcher today. It's breaking all the records, so we'll bring you something more on that after 6 o'clock. We're going to the Met Service, I think, to find out exactly what's been going on in the capital. Now, Immigration New Zealand says the owners of an Auckland restaurant should start making arrangements to sell up and leave the country, because their business was never approved and it's not considered to be of significant value. The Shetkava family arrived in New Zealand from the Ukraine 6 years ago on a long-term business visa to develop a large restaurant. Now, after that deal fell through, the family built up a smaller restaurant in the Auckland suburb of St Heliers, where they've turned La Vista a thriving business which now employs 26 people. Natalia Shetkava says that she notified Immigration New Zealand of the restaurant changes and was told that she didn't need to create a new business plan to keep her visa. But Immigration New Zealand says otherwise and has declined the family's residency application, saying they need to leave the country by the 1st of July. And as Eva Corlett reports, La Vista's customers are rallying behind the owner's bid to stay.
When I arrive at La Vista around lunchtime, there is barely a seat free. As I sit down to wait for Natalia Shetkava to finish serving her customers, locals queue up to speak to me. Kirsten McDonald is a regular.
Always so busy. I've never come in here and it's not busy. Like, everyone knows La Vista, everyone knows the owners, they're amazing. The staff, the service, absolutely they add to the community. It'd be devastating.
This customer, Mary, says the family is adored in the small seaside community, especially Natalia with her wide smile.
Everybody in the area loves her. It's a real proper local cafe, even though there's other cafes around it. This seems to draw the crowd. And she's such a beautiful person herself. I think it would be terrible. You know, I mean, we keep people here that you feel don't need to be here. And here's a family that we'd love to keep on our shores, and, you know, she's been pushed out.
So in your mind, this place does add significant value to the community?
It does, and the fact that she has a staff of 17 permanents and 26 altogether, I think that speaks for itself.
Nikki Doherty says Natalia gave her daughter her first waitressing job.
From knowing nothing to ended up being a top-level waitress with the experience that Natalia had and and support crew that she's got around her is just invaluable. Grace has confidence to now go anywhere in New Zealand.
For Nikki, losing the family would be devastating.
It's just wrong in every aspect. That what she's brought to this community is invaluable.
And aside from the good sort of training processes that are in place for people that work here, what other things does the family, Natalia, or this restaurant bring to the community?
So, for example, we come in for coffee with my mum, who's in her 70s, walked in, knows her by name, knows how she likes the hot chocolate. You know, just that sense of family whānau is just incredible. And it doesn't matter where Natalia comes from in the world, she's a Kiwi. She's one of us.
Natalia finishes chatting with customers and we move into a courtyard area at the back of the restaurant. She tells me her family ran 3 restaurants in the Ukraine.
We decided to move a long time ago because Ukraine is a country of bribes and corruption and high crime, and we were looking for the better future for our children.
After an 8-month approval period, they were awarded a long-term business visa to set up a successful, large fine dining restaurant. That requires a detailed plan with specific targets to meet. It must be worth at least $500,000, turn a profit and employ a minimum 3 full-time staff. But the restaurant they had their eye on sold before they arrived. Still, they came with their 3 children and found another worth $700,000, La Vista. Soon after, their twins were born. Natalia says she notified Immigration NZ of the changes and asked what they needed to do to make a new plan for their visa. She says the immigration officer asked for new figures but told her a new plan wasn't required.
We applied to the accountant. She made a new aim, new numbers. We sent it to the immigration department, and straight away, just in 2 weeks, we got our passports back with the label, and it was written La Vista Restaurant. So we suppose that our new numbers were approved.
Over the years, the family has extended the restaurant from 40 seats to 70, employed more staff, and plans were in the works to expand it further. It turned over $1.6 million last year and employs 26 people, 17 of them full-time. Thinking they had ticked all the boxes, the family applied for permanent residency in 2017. But their application was rejected. Natalia feels the system has let her down through misleading advice and for seeing them as a piece of paper, not a contributing family. Natalia says her staff rely on her and the family has built a life in the community and gives back to it.
We promise we keep doing everything what we can. We are not going to, sit on the benefit or something. No, we are hard worker, we are healthy, we are enthusiastic people, and we are interested to bring something to New Zealand society.
In a statement, Immigration NZ says the business does not add significant benefit to New Zealand by creating sustained and ongoing employment over and above the existing level of employment. And it says the family should make arrangements to leave by the 1st of July, including selling the business if necessary. Natalia is urging the Immigration Minister Ian Lees-Galloway to give the family compassionate consideration. I tāmaki makaurau mō te hōtaka o te ahiahi nei, ko Eva Corlett, tēnei.
The Prime Minister, Jacinda Ardern, has spent much of her first post-cabinet press conference of the year defending the controversial KiwiBuild program. A very public spat has erupted between the former head of the KiwiBuild program, who resigned a fortnight ago, and the head of the new Housing and Urban Development Ministry. And the government's had to admit that it won't meet its target of building 1,000 homes by July this year, saying it's now aiming for 300. Here's political reporter Gia Garrick.
The Housing Minister, Phil Twyford, is taking a paper to Cabinet outlining what's gone wrong with KiwiBuild and how he plans to fix it. Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern says the pace of building isn't as quick as they'd like, but says they do remain committed to the 10-year target of 100,000 homes. Mr Twyford has previously committed to building 10,000 homes in 2020 to 21 and 12,000 every year after that until 2028. Ms Ardern wouldn't recommit the government to those until she's seen Mr Twyford's update.
We have 4,000 roughly under contract. We have several hundred that are under construction. But as I say, the target that matters to us is the 100,000 homes that we've committed to. It is a 10-year program. We are still only 6 months into that.
Just as pressing is the employment dispute between the former head of KiwiBuild, Stephen Barclay, and the new Housing and Urban Development Ministry Chief Executive, Andrew Crisp. Ms Ardern has washed her hands of the matter.
It's an employment matter. It was around alleged conduct issues. It has nothing to do with KiwiBuild.
There's been lots of discussion about what went wrong last year to cause a breakdown in the relationship between Mr Barclay and Mr Crisp. Both released conflicting statements last night about the chain of events that ultimately saw Mr Barclay resign. It was sparked by a number of complaints laid about Mr Barclay to Mr Crisp, which the former suggests he wasn't given time to rectify.
The complaints were sort of generally related to my management style and also my dealings, my direct dealings with a couple of people, 2 or 3 people inside the KiwiBuild unit.
Mr Barclay is now taking the ministry and Mr Crisp to court, pursuing a case of constructive dismissal. He says his relationship with Mr Crisp began deteriorating when the KiwiBuild unit, which had been set up as a standalone entity, was moved under the umbrella of the ministry. Mr Barclay says all that did was put up barriers to achieving the minister's goals.
All of a sudden, as these processes and decision-making and meeting forums and all that sort of stuff stuck around it, I suppose that's where the wheels started to fall off between him and I. I was focused on, and the team were focused on delivering the targets. We weren't focused on trying to establish his new ministry.
In a statement last night, Mr Crisp said he launched an employment investigation into the complaints made about Mr Barclay, but that was never completed because Mr Barclay chose to resign first. He said the allegations reflected behaviours that are not consistent with standards expected of senior public servants. Mr Crisp also said there was no exit payout or deal made, and the resignation was accepted and effected immediately. Today he told RNZ he had nothing further to add. Ashley Church, who leads the Property Institute of New Zealand, says Mr Barclay has vast experience in the private sector, but probably wasn't aware of the constraints of the public sector when he took on the job. He suggests the government will have difficulty finding someone to replace Mr Barclay.
They need to find somebody who's well versed in the culture of the public service and can operate within the particular and peculiar mechanism of the public service in a way which is quite different to the private sector. And I'm not sure that such a person actually exists. In fact, I'd go as far as to say that I suspect that that's one of the reasons that the relationship with Barclay hasn't worked out.
Mr Church doesn't think any of the blame for this should fall on the minister, who he says has merely had to deal with the fallout. From Parliament for Checkpoint, Gia Garrick.
Junior doctors are threatening to keep striking throughout February unless hospitals back down in their employment row. The doctors walked off wards again today at the beginning of their second 48-hour strike over proposed job changes. Our health correspondent Karen Brown has more.
Not fair, not safe, not fair, not safe.
Between 40 and 50 junior doctors picketed outside Wellington Regional Hospital from 8 o'clock this morning. They said they took to the streets 2 years ago to gain safer hours in their current employment deal, which their employers now want to water down. A senior registrar, Brian Corley, said he didn't want to see that happen.
I've worked in Ireland before and I came over here because the working conditions are much better. So we're quite pleased with the fact that we have safer hours, more time to rest after working long hours. We can do the job that we're supposed to do better and with sufficient rest.
He added district health boards want to remove the power of the Doctors' Union, the Resident Doctors Association, to veto some changes to work practices it doesn't like.
I mean, we have elected them to represent us for a good reason. It's not for the DHB bargaining team to tell us who represents us. We will tell them who represents us and the RDA represent us.
A Wellington Hospital Emergency Department doctor, Tessa Ramsden, backed that notion.
At the moment, our union can protect us from being forced to shift hospitals, for being forced to work long hours or longer than we already do, and more days in a row than we already do. And they want to take the union out of those negotiations, which would leave us incredibly vulnerable.
Dr Ramsden said planned changes to rosters haven't affected emergency departments yet, but she understands the problem of long hours at work.
We do shift work and the roster changes haven't personally affected me, but I think it's really important to support all my colleagues because I remember what it was like when I was a house surgeon doing 12 days in a row and 7 nights in a row, and it was horrendous.
A Wellington Hospital cardiology house surgeon, Gregory O'Neill, conceded the current pay and employment deal isn't perfect when it comes to complex hospital rosters.
Nothing is perfect, but the current attitude of the DHBs seems to be that they wish to dictate everything, and they're not negotiating in good faith from what any of us can see.
But he said the changes DHBs want make little sense and junior doctors will continue to fight against them.
We will be forced back out on strike again in February. We've already had to give notice for mid-February, and we're voting at present on a further set of strikes for the end of February.
An anaesthetic trainee and union delegate, Rohit Katial, said doctors are aware of the disruption caused to patients but insisted strike action was needed.
I don't think it's going to have a huge impact on the acute care of patients. It shouldn't do. It is a bit worrying what impact they might have on the elective cases and things, which is why we want to get to an agreement as soon as we can.
DHB said they don't want the current system to roll over for another 3 years, saying many have acknowledged it has problems. Their contingency planner, Anne Aitchison, said demand for some services was higher than they'd hoped for today, but contingency plans helped cover the shortfall.
A number of the hospitals were very busy and full first thing this morning, so the staff are actively working hard to ensure that we can provide support to those patients who have no option but to be in hospital at this time.
Hospitals are reminding anyone who's unwell not to stay away and to go to a local emergency department if needed. Mō te hōtaka o te ahi ahi, ko Karen Brownaho.
And it is about 10 minutes to 6. Now, we're getting reports at the moment that hundreds of commuters in Wellington are stranded. They're waiting for trains. Well, the trains are off to Hutt Valley and Johnsonville, and we're getting reports that the buses are nowhere to be seen. So let us know if you're standing on a platform there waiting for transport. We're keen for your feedback. You can text us on 2101, tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ, or email us at checkpoint@rnz.co.nz, and we'll have more on that developing story after 6, but do get in touch if you are stuck in that commuter gnarl-up. A Scottish tourist charged $900 for a 5-minute taxi ride has finally received a refund, but it wouldn't have taken so long to resolve if the industry wasn't deregulated, the Taxi Federation says. Wellington Cabs finally refunded John Barrett the money today, telling him it took so long to identify the error because the driver was using a different EFTPOS terminal than the company uses. The Taxi Federation says that while Mr Barrett's case is the most extreme it's heard of, it's not uncommon. RNZ's transport reporter Mediana Johnson has the story.
When John Barrett caught a 5-minute taxi ride in Wellington City last Monday, he paid his fare without looking at how much he was charged and didn't think about it again. That was until his card declined at the supermarket.
That's what prompted me to check my online credit card account, and that's when I found out the $930 had been taken out by the taxi driver, and my wife and I were absolutely horrified. That sort of thing's never happened to us.
Mr Barrett says he has spent the last week desperately trying to track down the driver who had the sign Wellington on his taxi. He contacted Wellington Cabs, which initially told him it wasn't one of their drivers, but called back last night to say it was their driver after all and arranged a refund.
I've been told what has happened, but I've not really been told why it happened and why a driver was allowed to use an EFTPOS machine that wasn't an official EFTPOS machine for that particular taxi company. So I'm still a bit puzzled about why it happened and also why it took over a week.
Mr Barrett finally got his money back today, just in time for his flight home to the UK this afternoon. Wellington Cabs owner Mohammed, who only wanted his first name used, says the driver mistakenly overcharged to Mr Barrett, and it took a week to remedy because he didn't know who to contact. He says that as independent contractors, drivers often used their own EFTPOS terminals, which makes it difficult for the company to resolve issues such as this. The Taxi Federation president, John Hart, agrees that it is difficult for companies to track drivers. He says that it is a result of deregulation of the taxi industry that took effect in October 2017, which means drivers are no longer required to be employed by the companies they represent. He says this has health and safety implications too.
We're concerned as an industry that these standards have been lowered. Personally, I'm concerned as a father and grandfather that I have a daughter and granddaughters who may not be safe when they're out there getting home at night.
Mr Hart says the Federation gets a complaint about someone being overcharged every week. The Transport Agency says of the 365 complaints it received about commercial transport services and drivers in the last 2 years, 13 were related to overcharging or fare disputes. It says that in all but one of those cases, the driver and company were identified. A spokesperson says that it is an offence for drivers to demand more than an agreed fare or fail to issue a receipt. It encourages customers to raise disputes with the operators in the first instance. For Checkpoint, ko Miriana Johnson tēnei.
Tooting his own horn or a legitimate bid to get rid of horn-happy drivers. Wellington City Councillor Chris Calvi-Freeman has proposed banning the decades-old practice of honking in the Mount Victoria Tunnel as a way of encouraging more foot traffic. The Mount Vic Tunnel, which is part of State Highway 1, is more than 600 metres long and is used by vehicles, pedestrians and cyclists to travel between the eastern suburbs into the city. Our reporter Charlotte Cook went along to gauge opinions from those who use it.
I am right in the heart of the Mount Vic Tunnel and I've been here about 10 minutes and heard endless tooting. So there's a lot of tooting and noise going in here already. Heaps of cyclists and people walking past. And the people that I have spoken to think the tooting is a good thing.
Rumour has it the tooting pays tribute to a teenager who was buried alive in the foundations while the tunnel was being built in 1931. Her boyfriend, who was a tunnel worker, was hanged for murder. Another less grim theory is the ritual stems from the tunnellers, who had horns and whistles on their carts to avoid collisions in the dark. This couple from Holland admit they found the tooting a bit odd at first, but when told why people started doing it, they thought it was a good idea.
Yesterday we drove through this tunnel and we hear all the cars just making the noise and we were like, why are they doing it? So this is actually the first time we hear the reason why. But now I know the reason. I think it's a very good thing to do, yeah, definitely.
Hataito resident Mason Lawrence isn't worried by the tooting and doesn't support a ban.
I don't think it'll work. I think it'll actually compound the problem if he thinks it's a problem.
Mr. Lawrence, who was wearing a dust mask when we caught up with him walking through the tunnel, says people should be more concerned about the fumes rather than the noise. But this man supported the proposed ban.
I would prefer it if it was banned, yeah. I find it quite annoying because obviously when you're walking through, it's extremely loud and it's hard sometimes to wear headphones because of the cyclists. So I think that would be my main opinion.
The Wellington City Councillor who called for the ban, Chris Calvi-Freeman, says if drivers lay off the horn, it could encourage more pedestrians and cyclists to use the tunnel.
It's just annoying. I mean, the tunnel is not a pleasant environment for walkers at the best of times, and cyclists try and squeeze through there as well as they're allowed to do on the footpath, and it's less than 2 metres wide. It's just not a very nice environment, so anything we can do to improve it would be good.
The Transport Agency's Mark Owen says it will consider any request from the council, but he doesn't believe the tradition will stop anytime soon. He did, however, ask drivers to spare a thought for those walking or riding through the tunnel before they toot away. For Checkpoint, Charlotte Cook.
Can't wait to hear what you think of that one. To toot or not to toot, tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ or you can contact us on text 2101. Winning the lottery and figuring out how we would spend the loot is something most of us dream about. But a couple from the US state of Michigan have done it multiple times by figuring out a loophole in the system. In total, they won $26 million and Hollywood is now going to make a film showing how they did it. The BBC's Charlotte Gallagher has the story.
In 2003, Jerry Selby had recently retired after selling his convenience store when he saw an advert for a new lottery called Windfall. He'd studied maths at university and said it took him less than 3 minutes to work out how to beat the system. With this particular game, every time the jackpot hit $5 million and no one had all 6 numbers, the money was shared between people who had matched 5, 4 or 3 of the numbers. Mr. Selby and his wife Marge bought thousands of tickets, so statistically they would have enough of the numbers to win part of the jackpot. He told CBS it was just simple maths.
Actually, it's just basic arithmetic. The only thing I found really remarkable is nobody else really seemed to grasp it.
The couple carried on playing the lottery in different states for years, sharing their secret with friends who also won millions of pounds. Unfortunately for the rest of us, this particular loophole has now been closed after journalists uncovered it. Despite winning millions, the Selbys aren't living lavish lifestyles and still eat lunch in the local cafe.
Charlotte Gallagher reporting there. And some time for your feedback. Let's return to an earlier story, which was about the insurance industry. They've, been given a serve from the Reserve Bank and the Financial Markets Authority over the way they're selling policies. This person says, having gotten out of the risk insurance industry a couple of years ago, your interviewee neglected to mention the responsibility of insurance agents who, in many cases, sell the consumers the policies. They're the middle people, so speak regularly to their clients, or should speak regularly to their clients about their policies and adjust them according to their needs and stage in life. Instead, these agents just get fat on the extremely generous commissions the insurance companies pay them. That's from Jay of Auckland. And this other person says, regarding the integrity of the companies selling insurances, the problem's not just limited to life insurance.
RNZ News at 6 o'clock. Good evening, I'm Anna Thomas. The government will fast-track consumer protection measures in the financial sector after a review of life insurance companies. A joint report by the Financial Markets Authority and the Reserve Bank has found companies charge customers for expired policies, sold policies people could not legally use, and had poor systems and attitudes when it came to fixing complaints and mistakes. It follows a report on banking conduct released in December. The Commerce and Consumer Affairs Minister Chris Fafoi says the problems highlighted in both reports are similar but more extensive in the life insurance report. Mr Fafoi says the government will get rid of sales incentives in the insurance industry and a consultation paper will be released by May. Meanwhile, the life insurance industry body admits it has work to do to improve its conduct after the review found the sector is putting profits before consumers. The Chief Executive of the Financial Services Council, Richard Klippen, says members will now work towards the June deadline they've been given to come up with a plan of action.
It's pretty confronting, and I think the magnitude of work to do has not been lost on our members, and so that's ultimately what we're going to now be focusing on.
The Financial Services Council Chief Executive Richard Kilpin. The Cancer Society is disputing the result of testing of its children's sunscreen products by Consumer New Zealand. The testing found the Cancer Society's SPF 50 Plus Kids Pure product is only SPF 41. The Society's Chief Executive, Mike Kernahan, contests that and says the lab's testing process was to blame for the poor result. He wants the product tested again in a mutually agreed laboratory, but Consumer New Zealand has declined that, saying further tests would be unfair to other companies.
We stand by our sunscreen and the claims on the label. The offer still stands to get the Kids Pure SPF 50 Plus tested somewhere in the world in a right laboratory that we can both agree on, and let's see what the result is. But whether we can get to that place or not, I don't know.
Mike Kernahan says testing is the only fair way to give sunscreen users the confidence they deserve at this time of the year. The Commerce Commission has laid 10 charges against the car sale yard chain Too Cheap Cars, accusing it of misleading customers. It started investigating the company in November 2017 after a number of complaints. Sarah Robson has more.
The Commerce Commission says the charges relate to Too Cheap's must liquidate and 84% off advertising claims and its use of warranty waiver documents. It says the discounts were misleading because they didn't relate to the price of the car, but to the price of a voucher that could be put towards a purchase. The Commission says Too Cheap also asked customers to sign a warranty waiver if they didn't buy an extended warranty. It says that may have misrepresented to those people what their rights are under the Consumer Guarantees Act. The Commission estimates more than 20,000 warranty waivers were signed between January 2014 and December 2017. Ko Sarah Robson, Aho.
The Chinese government has responded to today's announcement the US is laying criminal charges against Huawei, saying they are unfair and immoral. The US Justice Department has charged the telecommunications company and its chief financial officer, Meng Wanzhou, with conspiring to violate US sanctions on Iran. Ms Meng was arrested in Canada at the request of the US and is awaiting an extradition hearing. Other charges include bank fraud and conspiring to steal trade secrets. China's foreign ministry has urged the US to stop what it called unreasonable suppression of Chinese companies, including Huawei, and to lift the arrest warrant against Ms Meng. And the Australian telecommunications company TPG is stopping its rollout of its mobile network due to the government's ban on the use of equipment from Huawei. It says it doesn't make commercial sense to pump more money into a network it won't be able to upgrade to 5G. The ABC's Stephanie Chalmers reports.
TPG will cease building the mobile network, blaming the federal government's ban on its equipment provider Huawei. The decision comes as TPG awaits approval for its proposed merger with Vodafone, which has raised concerns from the competition regulator. Huawei Australia says the announcement is extremely disappointing for consumers and businesses.
Stephanie Chalmers reporting. Protesters have gathered outside the offices of the Brazilian mining company Vale as rescuers continue a desperate search for survivors from the weekend dam collapse in the southeast. The collapse triggered a deadly mudslide which buried mining facilities and nearby homes. The death toll has risen to 65, with up to 280 people still missing. Demonstrators painted slogans on the company's offices in Rio de Janeiro, including "Murderers" and "It was not an accident." Vale's share price has plunged by nearly 25% on the Brazilian stock market in the wake of the disaster. In Wellington, as well as the stifling heat, some commuters are having to cope with some trains not running. The Johnsonville, Melling and Hutt Valley lines are all down due to power or points problems. The Johnsonville line has been replaced by buses, but no extra buses are being put on for Hutt Valley commuters. A spokesperson for the train operator, Trandev, says it is possible the hot weather has played a role in the failures, but a commuter on the Kapiti Waikanai line, Thomas Adams, says his train this afternoon was delayed by 20 minutes because it had no driver.
It doesn't really make a lot of sense, and it's not the first time that it's happened. We've kind of, at least once a week, had a call saying, sorry, we're running late, we don't have a driver.
Transdev says it's possible the driver was not able to get back to Wellington with the cancelled services, but it can't confirm this. It's 6:06. The New Zealand women's cricket team has made an early breakthrough against India in the second one-day international in Maumaunganui as they battled to keep the three-match series alive. A short time ago, the tourists were 7 for 1 after 2 overs in reply to the White Ferns' disappointing total of 161. The skipper Amy Satterthwaite top scored with 71 in an otherwise poor batting display, and the home side was dismissed with 5 overs still remaining. India lead the three-match series 1-0. New Zealand Thoroughbred Racing says plans to close 21 courses by 2030 have not been prompted by a government review of the sport. Unsustainable costs across the industry have the body proposing the number of racecourses be cut from 48 to 27 over the next 11 years. Last year, the government released a review which suggested outsourcing the TAB's commercial activities, reducing the number of thoroughbred racetracks from 48 to 28, and building 3 new all-weather tracks at Cambridge, Awapuni and Riccarton. New Zealand Thoroughbred Racing is now calling for feedback from racing clubs, hoping to confirm the numbers and venues to close by the middle of the year. And that's the news.
Tonight on Nights, the second instalment of our window on the World Series on dementia. Kirsten Johnstone has a song crush, and this week's after-dinner speaker, Stella McQueen, joins us from the cool banks of some leafy stream to discuss aquatic life. This evening, fish personality, if that's not too anthropogenic for you, on Nights with me, Brian Crump, from after the news at 7 on RNZ National.
And now the short forecast from Met Service until midnight tomorrow. Northland, Auckland and Coromandel, fine. Cloudy periods tonight and tomorrow with patchy drizzle until tomorrow afternoon. And for the remainder of the North Island, mainly fine and hot. However, areas of cloud morning and night and isolated afternoon showers about the central high country. For Nelson, Marlborough and Canterbury, fine and hot with high cloud at times. Coastal fog possible tomorrow morning. Bulla and Westland, fine and cloudy periods. Fiordland, often cloudy. Patchy drizzle about the fjords, turning to widespread rain for a time tomorrow morning. Otago and Southland, generally fine and hot with variable high cloud, but scattered rain for a time tomorrow morning. And for the Chatham Islands, fine weather. RNZ National, it is 6:09 and you're listening to Checkpoint with Lisa Owen.
Thank you, Anna. And yeah, it's all about the weather at the moment, isn't it? If you live in Wellington and you thought it was a hot day today, guess what? You're right. A 90-year-old record was smashed in the capital with temperatures peaking at more than 30 degrees. Joining us now live is Met Service meteorologist Georgina Griffiths. Hi, Georgina.
Hello, Lisa.
Suburb. What was the hottest suburb down there? I understand, was it Kelburn?
No, Porirua clocked in at 31 degrees flat, and Wainuiomata was similar, and Kelburn broke an all-time record. And I guess when people wonder about, these records, is it just where they're taking the temperatures, remembering that Kelburn, where Met Service HQ is one of the longest and highest quality temperature stations in New Zealand. It's a lovely grassy enclosure on the top of the botanical garden that has not been modified in the 90 years of record, and today it broke its all-time temperature record, recording 30.3 there today. So it's a really notable hot day for Wellington.
So, just to be clear, the temperature has been taken at the same spot for more than 90 years, and today that area, blew that record out of the water.
Yes. And that's the value of not just bunging a thermometer in your car or some hot in the sun place. If you keep your records in a proper enclosure where all the WMO, World Organisation standards are maintained, then you know whether it's the hottest day, not just because your thermometer has been moved. And Kelburn is one of our best records in the country, if not the best. We're a bit biased, of course, because Met Service run it. And it broke its all-time record today by a margin, not just 0.1 of a degree. So, we had our hottest day in Kelburn since records began in 1927.
What about the rest of the country?
Oh, well, it was a scorcher, of course, widespread heat day too, and the widespread's the key thing. Anywhere between Auckland and the west coast of the North Island, right down to Wellington, recorded abnormally hot temperatures even for January. In fact, we actually saw a few records in Auckland tumble. We had 30 degrees in many of the suburbs inland away from the coast where the sea breeze couldn't get to cool things off. And we cracked 30 degrees at Ardmore. That's not a record, it's number 11, but Whenuapai ranked as number 3, 30.3, the same temperature as Kelburn reached today. And that's a notable record in a 74 or 5-year temperature regime there. And that, of course, is another really nice station that we run. We also saw Taumarunui reach 33.6 degrees, which is pretty hot, and number 2 ranking in a record since the war. So you don't have to look too far down the country. All that slot, Wanganui, Palmerston North, Paeroa, up through Levin was all in excess of 30 degrees. In fact, many places more than 31. Not all of those will be records, but all of them are pretty notable. And I talked about the widespread slot. It goes on and on. The heat is expected to maintain until Friday for the South Island, where a cool change slowly works its way up the country. So some cooler relief. I'm not saying cold.
Define cooler, Georgina. What sort are you talking about temperature-wise?
Well, we might see Christchurch, for example, go from 31 to 25. So we might drop the temperature by 5 degrees, which is pretty notable. But it takes until Saturday morning for the lower North Island to see some of that relatively cooler air come in. So, so I guess the key thing is 5 days of heat, guys. We're only in day 2. We've seen some individual records tumble, but that heat wave, that 4 or 5 day duration of abnormal heat, that's going to be the kicker, I think. And basically, it depends on where you are. Which day of the week will be hottest? Now, it was Auckland through Western North Island down to Wellington's turn today to be abnormal. I think that we're going to see the East Coast South Island, and including Nelson Marlborough, continue to warm up as we head towards Thursday. So they haven't seen the worst of the heat yet. And the East Coast of the North Island, places like Gisborne, Napier, Masterton, who cracked 35 yesterday and 33 and all that, they're pretty mild at the moment because they've got a little bit of a light onshore. And we don't see the temperatures really start to ramp up again there. I mean, we're still talking 27 to 30, by the way. But we expect to see between 30 and 34 in those regions again by Friday.
Wow.
So it's a long run.
It is a long run.
Long run of heat.
Thanks for that. That's Georgina Griffiths, who's a Met Service meteorologist. So get yourself a hat and a popsicle and chill out under a tree if you can. Hundreds of commuters are stranded in Wellington tonight. Trains running on the Johnsonville, Melling and Hutt Valley lines have all been halted as a result of power or point problems. The Johnsonville line has been replaced by buses, but no extra buses are being put on for commuters to the Hutt Valley. Our reporter Kate Gudsell is at the Wellington train station. Kate, what's going on there?
Oh, hi, Lisa. Well, I arrived at about 5:30 and there were hundreds and hundreds of people just sort of milling around trying to find out exactly what was happening with their ride home. They were looking at the screens, which weren't really giving them that much information. And then also they were trying to listen to the announcements over the tannoy, but you couldn't hear anything, and so it wasn't very clear. And so there was a lot of frustration, I think, for people just trying to find how they were going to get home.
Yeah, so what have they been saying to you about the lack of information and the wait?
Well, I heard the same story over and over again. People turned up at the train station and to find out that the train had been cancelled, and 5 minutes later they got a notification to tell them that the train had been cancelled. So they're now having to arrange alternative routes home. A lot of them are getting their people, their partners to come and pick them up, but obviously that's going to be compounded by the fact that the traffic's going to be really bad because they've got all these buses on. People are getting buses now. Other stories I heard were people, had children stuck in daycare, so they were having to try and find alternative arrangements to pick them up. I spoke to one woman who was 6 months pregnant, and her friend were having to pay $80 to get an Uber ride back to their house in Alistown in the Hutt Valley. So people are pretty frustrated about it.
Yeah, and for people who can't see, I'm just looking at a picture here from the train station, Kate, which has got about 3 or 4, 5 people deep on the platforms, stretching for several metres up the platform. So, as you say, packed there. What has Transdev had to say about the situation?
Well, they've basically said that unusually high temperatures have affected the wires that provide the overhead power supply on the Hutt Valley and Johnsonville lines, which has basically led them to put in bus replacements on services in the meantime.
Thank you very much. That is Kate Gudsell, who's been down at the Wellington train station there. As we said, problems with trains on the Johnsonville, Melling and Hutt Valley lines. And when Kate was down there, the commuters are, they're 3 or 4 deep and hundreds of them trying to find a way home. Selling life insurance policies to people who can't use them, charging for expired policies, failing to tell people their cover has changed and putting profits before customers. Those are some of the damning findings in a report from the Financial Markets Authority and Reserve Bank after they took a detailed look at conduct in the life insurance sector. And the report's already got the government's attention, with Cabinet today deciding to fast-track plans for better oversight of banks and insurers' conduct. Kim Savage has more.
The picture being painted by the regulators isn't a pretty one. They're criticising life insurers for acting too slowly to make changes after previous warnings about their behaviour, and accusing them of caring more about the agents selling their policies than consumers. The Financial Markets Authority Chief Executive Rob Everett says firms are not doing enough to combat the risks of poor conduct.
What we found was poor governance of conduct risk, underdeveloped systems and controls for managing that risk, a general lack of focus on customer outcomes. And we did find some examples of what we're describing as poor conduct and some examples of potential misconduct.
The FMA says it's found only instances of potential misconduct, behaviour which could be considered illegal, and it's not widespread through the industry. It's not clear which life insurers are in the gun, with the FMA saying it doesn't yet have enough evidence to name and shame. But the report cites examples of consumers not being told of higher charges, increased risks, or reduced benefits and coverage when they renewed or changed their life and health insurance policies. It also found examples of policies being sold to overseas residents who are not eligible to claim on them, premiums charged when policies expired, or people being charged for 2 policies when they switched or upgraded. Rob Everett says it's hard to say what punishment could be in store for those responsible.
I would expect action off the back of some of what we've seen. Whether it will be court-based prosecutions or some other sanction, it's too early to judge, to be honest.
The industry's been warned before, criticised by the FMA last year for paying millions of dollars in commissions, as well as lavish holidays and other perks to third-party agents selling their policies without tackling issues of possible conflict, disclosure, or whether the products were appropriate. Life insurers are represented by the Financial Services Council, and Chief Executive Richard Clippen admits the report is a wake-up call.
It's pretty confronting, and I think the magnitude of
work to do has not been lost on our members. And so that's ultimately what we're going to now be focusing on.
The report calls for the government to impose more obligations on the part of insurers to clean up their act and to give regulators more powers to investigate. Noting that a comparison of life insurance commissions worldwide shows New Zealanders are paying a high rate of commissions, more than 20% of the cost of the premium, the Finance Minister Grant Robertson says the government will now fast-track measures to tighten the rules.
There's enough in this report to indicate to me that there is a serious problem, and what we're saying today is we're not prepared to sit back and wait. We are going to regulate to make sure that consumers' interests are protected. That will of course have to apply across the insurance industry as well as the banking industry.
Consumer New Zealand has been asking for more regulation of the life insurance sector for years. Chief Executive Sue Chetwin hopes the report will finally make insurers sit up and listen.
It's a very poor industry in terms of consumer outcomes. So I think it would be a brave lot that actually ignored this report, which is absolutely damning.
The regulators have given the industry until the middle of the year to explain how it's going to shape up. For Checkpoint, I'm Kim Savage.
And residents of Kawerau are set for more water disruptions as the District Council tries to put an end to the yellow-brown colour that's plagued their pipes. There'll be a halt in chlorination for at least a week, maybe longer, so workers can thoroughly flush and clean pipes. But there are fears that without chlorine, there is a higher risk of E. coli contamination. Malcolm Campbell is Kawerau Mayor and he joins me now. Hi Malcolm, so is this basically a choice between having yellowy brown water or potentially getting sick from E. coli? It doesn't seem like a great either or option.
No, that's right, and it's always been our concern with our water because we never used to chlorinate it, so what we're basically going to do is we've stopped chlorine as of 1 o'clock this afternoon, which has been having a bit of a reaction on our pipes, to be honest, and we're going to start flushing immediately and see where we go from here. What we've always done, though, is we've always done 3-day tests on our water supply in the past, and if there's any type of E. coli that comes up, we then shock dose. And that's where we're basically going back to what we've been doing for the last 40, 50 years anyway.
So you can't really guarantee that the water will be safe, can you?
No,
without the chlorine?
Once you take chlorine out, you cannot guarantee that it is safe.
How worried are you about that?
That is a concern. It's always been a concern of the council, and especially since Havelock, the Havelock incident. So we've known that this was the writing on the wall once that did happen, and we are concerned, but we also know that this is probably the better way of going about getting down to the niche of the problem and do away with the chlorine for a start, because it has had a dramatic effect on our pipes.
So how are you letting people know what's going on?
We've done that through social media, obviously, and our local radio stations. But we'll be broadcasting that all the way down along. It hasn't taken long. The bushwire has been out there going wild this afternoon, and people are joyous that they're not going to have chlorine in the water. However, there are people out there also saying, well, hey, hold on. This could mean that our water is contaminated. Look, that's always been a risk. Well, while we had no chlorine in our water, and we've had that for, as I say, 50 to 60 years.
So, I mean, how worried are you? Are you going to meet the Ministry of Health standards for drinking water during the time that you're not chlorinating?
You never will when you're not chlorinated.
Okay.
There is always that risk of contamination.
Is there any concern they'll come after you about that?
Sorry?
Is there any concern they'll come looking for you over that?
Welcome. No doubt they will, and I welcome them. I welcome them because I'll be the first one there leading the charge to have them come into our community and tell them exactly where we stand. And it's time that water regulators took hold and made us do this. We don't have a problem with that. Where we have an issue is that we were frightened that the regulators would take our water off us altogether, and that's where the issue is. And it's right across the country. It's happening everywhere in the country right now. We don't want to lose local authorities don't want to lose charge of their water, because I don't care what anyone says, we can supply our water a hell of a lot cheaper than what some of these big conglomerates can do. And they'll argue the other way. We'll put it to them anytime.
So, Malcolm, how many complaints have you had about the water?
For the
colour of it. The colour of it,
hundreds,
yeah.
Hundreds. And that's just out of the ordinary for our water. Our water is, and we had it televised the other day on Sunday. The water source is pristine, as I've always said it was pristine. I was misquoted on Saturday to say, well, our water is pristine, but it's still safe. What I meant by that is our water from our spring is safe, and it's also, it has UV, so we UV treat it. But once it's in our reticulation system, that's where the issue comes, and that's what we've always been on about in the past. So yeah, we're not the most popular council in town right now or around at present for chlorinating our water, but I totally understand where the people of Kare are coming from. I've enjoyed our water for 63 years.
Will the pipes stand up to this? Sorry to interrupt. We're just running out of time, and I want to know whether you think that the pipes, this sounds like a pretty robust operation here. Are the pipes going to stand up to that, or are you worried?
Oh, yes. No, look, we've done an audit on our pipes last year, and we came up trumps with that, so that's why we're not really concerned about that part of it. The pipes are not an issue at all. We've got a very young town. The pipes are all in good nick. So we don't have a real issue with that. What we want to do is get to the crux of the problem and get rid of the dirty water.
Thank you, Malcolm. That is Malcolm Campbell, the Mayor of Kawerau there, taking the chlorination out of their water while they flush the pipes, because they've got, well, it's kind of a yellowy brown colour to their water at the moment, and as he said, hundreds of people complaining. A Northland landowner could face prosecution over a fire that threatened a pine plantation on his land. It's the latest in a week of serious wildfires, starting with 2 in the Bay of Islands last week and a blaze that burned off more than 60 hectares at Horeke near Kaikoui on Saturday. The North's had almost no rain since before Christmas, and the region is tinder dry. And today, fire crews have been sweltering in temperatures in the early 30s to fight a fire on a farm block west of Whangarei. The region's Deputy Chief Rural Fire Officer, Rory Renwick, says the landowner was burning off a big pile of slash or forestry waste without a permit, and in the searing heat the fire escaped.
In this case it was an unpermitted fire, so had we had a chance to look at it, we would have identified some of the risks and helped the person manage it, and probably suggested that they wait a couple of months until things are getting wetter rather than drier and the risk is easier to manage.
So is there a penalty for that? Is the landowner up for the costs of the firefighting?
There is potential for a prosecution of up to $300,000.
And do you think that might happen or not?
Can't say at this stage. We've got to look at what that person has done and in terms of safety, and at the moment, as I say, we're in the early stages of making sure that the fire's not going to do any more damage.
Do you think those pines are safe?
It's safe while we've got crews here, and we'll keep the crews here until we believe it is safe to walk away. Another couple of days yet.
You've had a pretty exhausting week. You've had one damn fire after another.
Yes, and I'm rather sweaty at the moment. It's been an interesting week.
How hot is it out there?
I believe it's in the low 30s, so this is part of the problem, is this heat wave that's come across. And where we are at the moment, it's a bit humid as well, so it doesn't help. For forest fires, we don't wear the same as what structural firefighters do, but you've still got to be protected, and you are still fully covered, and it certainly gets hot. And firefighter fatigue and dehydration is certainly a real hazard. Up to 9 or 10 litres a day I've drunk at a fire.
And we've just got an update now on those trains in Wellington. Metlink says trains on the Johnsonville line are now resuming after the power outage, with the first service from Wellington leaving at 6:32 p.m. So you've got a couple of minutes, it's about 6:28 now. The first train from Johnsonville will resume at 7 p.m. Services haven't yet resumed on the Hutt Valley line. So to repeat that, Johnsonville line now resuming. First train will leave Wellington 6:32 p.m. The first train from Johnsonville Nelsonville will resume at 7 p.m, but services haven't yet resumed on the Hutt Valley line. I hope that helps you in Wellington on your commute home or back into the city. Now some feedback on some of our stories from today. The Vic Tunnel, whether you should to honk or not to honk. This is the story about whether there should be a ban on the decades-old practice of honking in the tunnel. Honking in the tunnel is not about the history, it is about tradition. It's the Wellington Happy Test, this person says. One can gauge the happiness of the people by the answers one receives from honks. It doesn't go well after a bad day at the Basin Reserve, or if the sun isn't shining, a ban will not work. We love it, this person says. A happiness test. I love it. And Sam says, I find honking noisy and distracting as a driver. It's childish. And when I have cycled through it, it's deadening. Let's grow up and stop it, for heaven's sake. Well, it's not on Sam's happiness register. And James says you can't ban using the horn in the Mount Vic Tunnel. That's like banning the use of the brakes. They should discourage misuse of the horn, says James. And on the sunblock and the stoush between the Cancer Society and Consumer New Zealand over whether those sunscreens are up to scratch. This person says, I have skin that is incredibly sensitive to the sun, have used Cancer Society sunblock all summer without getting sunburnt. That, along with the Cancer Society testing, would suggest user error is the main problem. Thanks for joining us. We will catch you again tomorrow.
RNZ News headlines at 6:30. Commerce Minister Chris Farfoy says the government will get rid of sales incentives in the insurance industry after a damning review of life insurance companies. The Cancer Society is disputing test results for its children's sunscreen by Consumer New Zealand, which gave it a lower sun protection factor. The Commerce Commission is charging the car sales chain Too Cheap Cars over advertising which it says misled customers. And power outages due to hot weather as well as point failures causing chaos for Wellington commuters, with the Hutt Valley, Melling and Johnsonville trains all cancelled. Our next news and weather at 7.
RNZ National, with a fresh take on the day's news at 10 every weeknight with Karen Hay.
So many successive days, hot temperatures, humid weather,
including the latest national